This is Goals with Soul, the podcast for visionary coaches and entrepreneurs, building your business with inspired action. In alignment with your mission and authentic message, so you can create impact for your soul clients and feel lit up every day. I'm your host, Jo Ingram, married mum of 3 daughters from London and a former ad agency director turned business coach and strategist. In Goals with Soul, we blend revenue generation with energetics, marketing strategies with pranic healing, and ambitious business goals with our soul's desires. If you're looking to build your business with less efforting and more ease, this is the podcast for you. Let's dive in. Welcome to Goals with Soul. I'm Joanna Ingram, and today we're talking about the important topic of embodying intuition to improve your business success and attract soul clients. And it makes me reflect, less than 5 years ago, I was still working in corporate, working for advertising agencies in the heart of London. And, nearly 20 years I'd been doing that job, that career. And intuition was never mentioned once. I think anyone that's worked in corporate knows darn well that really intuition isn't something that we respect when it comes to making decisions or for taking actions, when it comes to operating in that specific environment. And such a journey it's been for me over the last 5 years to incorporate that intuitive voice into my work. And I really couldn't have progressed to where I am today, both in business results as well as in how much I enjoy doing what I do, unless I had lent into that. And we start talking about the masculine and the feminine. And obviously when I left corporate, I left with an immense amount of masculine drive because that's what I'd relied on for 2 decades. And moving into my feminine, moving into intuition wasn't something that happened overnight. And it's something that as an overthinker, I still grapple with many times because particularly when I'm under periods of stress, I want to contract back into what was familiar and what felt safe, which is the masculine doing, taking action, instead of quietening the mind and listening instead to that quiet voice of intuition, which is why today I'm so excited to introduce you to a former client and ongoing inspiration, Mary-Louisa Horrigan. Mary-Louisa is an intuitive embodiment coach who works with soulful female coaches on finding deep self-trust in themselves by turning up the volume on their intuition to powerfully up-level their business results and impact. Her specific focus is holding space to support her already powerful clients to really build the self-trust so they can create deep alignment and deep discernment and therefore create the big results. Mary-Louisa has had an incredible journey from having the self-trust to launch her business at an incredibly young age, to lean into her incredible natural gifts, and to allow her work to upgrade as new inspiration strikes, putting me in the fortunate situation of supporting her at one of her most dramatic up levels, where she's left an indelible mark on me, both from the results she's achieved as a client, as well as the impression she's left on me as a student of intuition. On today's episode, we are going to talk about creating more ease and flow and bringing more intuition into your life and business, what embodied intuition is and how to allow it, and ultimately the surrender of allowing alignment into your business. Let's dive in. Mary-Louisa, welcome to Goals with Soul.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I'm just overjoyed, deep in my heart.
And I'm excited to have you. We've been talking about you coming on the show for quite a while. And I just know that what you talk about is something that so many people are going to say, this is exactly what I needed to hear today. Because I know when you started to talk to me about embodied intuition, you were my client at the time. But, I learned from my clients just as they learned from me. And, the sort of expertise you brought to the space just blew my mind about really tuning in. And, before we get too deep in, can you give us a bit of a top line view when we're talking about intuition and embodied intuition, particularly in the realms of business? What does that really mean?
Absolutely. Yes, it was such a beautiful and collaborative experience working with you, just first off, because you're such an incredible coach, and I'm so glad that we could learn from each other. But absolutely. So when we're talking about intuition, we're really talking about getting deeply embroiled and deeply embodied within our own innate wisdom and what kind of comes to us naturally. And I think that's the really important thing to remember when it comes to intuition, especially in business, especially when you're so passionate about your business, is that this isn't some like far reaching, far away, impossible thing that you're striving to get. It's about getting so deeply enmeshed in the magic that is you. Not only that's your soul, but that's, being in your body, being in your passion, being in excitement, being in joy, that it starts to lead you and align you with the frequency of opportunity, right? That's what the true meaning of being aligned with your intuition in business, and not just in business, but in so many different parts of your life, comes down to. And I think that sometimes we overcomplicate intuition and we make it, well, oh my God, if I don't get this exact answer and this mean, like it's not working. And that's so like understandable, because we all want answers. We all want to get certain things, and it doesn't mean you can't get those, but it's just so much more than that. It's about being really deeply embodied and deeply joyful in the wisdom that is you. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
It's
You've
a,
said so
yeah.
much there, and I want to
Sorry.
unpick
I
it
know.
a
As
little
I
bit,
said, I was
right?
like,
I'll tell you something that really stood out for me, that gave me the tingles: the frequency of opportunity. Now,
mm,
I think I get what that means straight away. I know everyone's going to get that, but I haven't heard it put in that way. I think of it as signs and synchronicities, following the breadcrumbs, and, just having that path unfold in front of us. So, suddenly before we know it, some beautiful things have come in, and we've created that kind of vision that we had. We call it manifesting sometimes. But it's like, can we talk a little bit more about that frequency of opportunity? Like, why is it that some people don't invite opportunities? I mean, so frequent, right? We say, oh, it just feels like it's so hard. And other people get, good luck, and, oh, they just knew someone, or they went viral. I mean, fill in the gap. But what is that frequency of opportunity, and why is it that not everybody accesses it?
no, that's a fantastic question. And I always find it really interesting as well when we're talking about the relationship between intuition and manifestation, as you said, and why there's that gap. Because the truth is that I use my intuition to manifest just as much as I use visualization. I mean, I don't tend to use visualization, but it's about, I think for me, the where it comes to is it's about sinking in rather than reaching out. And that's where that kind of frequency change occurs. Does that make sense? It's a really hard thing. It's very niche to explain, but it's such a tricky thing, because I do kind of understand why we have these times in our lives where we feel like we're not getting anywhere, and we feel like, well, why is this happening for everyone else? Why I'm aligning, but I just think that they're periods of growth that we're growing through. And when we have to sink down back into our own authenticity and allow ourselves to kind of find what works for us, and that comes down to trusting the divine timing of things, and that is what intuition teaches us, right? When we go into ourselves, we're like, okay, but when something didn't happen, was that really the right timing for me? Was that the right opportunity for me? And that's why I think there's this really weird, like, kind of, it's almost like a bit of a squiggle line rather than like a clear join. Does that make sense? I feel like I've just gone off on a tangent. So please ask me to be more clear where you need me to be more clear.
No, there's a lot of good there, but like you said, it's the clarity of the understanding, because, most people listening to this, myself included, are people that really do understand about the law of attraction and frequencies and alignment. But also, like myself, a lot of us are overthinkers, and we get stuck in our own heads. And the idea of intuition, sounds really good, and certainly we have experienced it, but it isn't something that we would lean on to necessarily create results, right? So I know when I came out of corporate, I was like, right, in order to create results, I work really hard. I work harder and faster and better and smarter and all these things. Of course, found out 6 months later that wasn't the way, and I completely had burnout and was like, no, now I want feminine flow. Now I'm really curious, and have since learned a lot more about leaning into frequencies. But it's not something that is a once and done, right? I don't just say, oh, I learned it last summer and now I've got it. It's a kind of a bit like yoga. It's a practice. And it's like, the more you do it, the stronger the muscle gets, and you continue to evolve and develop through your life in that way. And I'm like, let's go back to the start for you. Obviously, as a intuition expert, someone that, speaks so knowledgeable on it. And I know coaches high level clients through it now and have helped so many people in other ways. Like, how did you end up in a place where kind of intuition and helping business owners to really bring that into business is what you do?
Well, to go back to the journey, we have to go a little bit back to me. So I started my work, well, put it this way, I was always very connected, highly connected. I was a clairvoyant since I was a young child. But however, as you know, as we go through these gifts, it's not necessarily just, you start from birth or you never start. That's not the way that it works. Some people are definitely tuned into the gifts in different ways, but we all have access to intuition. And as I grew older, intuition was just something that I very automatically leaned into. And I think that, going back to your question, just to bring it in here, it's also about finding that balance between like being in your mind, the intellectualization of it versus the feeling, and just finding that balance, because you need both, right? This is not some, all or nothing thing. If we were all just in our feelings, we wouldn't be helping ourselves. And if we were all just in our heads, we wouldn't be helping ourselves. And one of the most beautiful practices that I work with a lot of my clients doing is helping them find the midway point to sit, right? Sometimes they need to be all in their heart. Sometimes they need to be all in their head. And it's just about finding that midway point, which is very much an energetic kind of midpoint that we work to find. But going back to me, I started my business at 21, having been told consistently by spirit and consistently being pulled to start something, right? This is just, I was about to travel and go abroad and I wanted to make extra money and I'd always wanted to do something spiritual, but I think that going abroad and wanting to actually do something with it, wanting to take that opportunity was just my push, right? And so I remember I bought a tripod. I kept thinking, oh, YouTube, doing this. But spirit kept pulling me, kept pushing me. And the truth is it doesn't, sometimes with intuition, we get very stuck on the how, like, how's this going to happen? And spirit's like, just do something. Just do something. And then you start to open up to that opportunity of frequency by doing something. You've acted on your intuition, you've met it halfway. The steps will start to become apparent over time. And I started to see clients, and then slowly that evolved, because the truth is I got very burnt out from doing not client work, but readings, which were something that was such a beautiful way for me to connect with beautiful people and to really hone my abilities. Practice, that's it. That was my way. Practice, connection. But it got to the point where I just wanted to do more, right? I wanted to be able to see client success in a longer form. And so I started to teach and work with clients in order to help them not only switch on their intuition, but then use it to actually allow themselves to take steps forward that were, it had their basis in aligned action, right? And so I started working with all these different amazing clients, and I just started to see how powerful it was, not only to step into your intuition, because the intuition is just like the goal, so to speak. It's, just the way to step into it. But it was, the most powerful thing was them stepping into self-trust, which started to connect all the dots, because it wasn't just about intuition, about them being like, okay, well, now I know that this is going to happen. That's not the goal. We can never know everything, and I say that as a psychic, you can never know everything. You're not meant to, and I wouldn't want to. I always say that I wouldn't want to know everything. Sorry, Joe. However, what you can do is have these tugs. What you can do is be able to trust yourself and trust the journey and trust that you will be tugged exactly where you need to be by, starting to zone into yourself, starting to trust yourself. But more than that, once I started to step into self-trust, it wasn't necessarily like a voice they were hearing. It was their own desires and wants and gut feeling. And they started to actually take, that aligned action, take that risk, take that step because they trusted themselves enough. They trusted not just their intuition, but themselves enough to actually do it. And that was the most powerful thing for me, that really made me want to work specifically with, soulful businesswomen, entrepreneurs, coaches, because they are needing to take that step constantly. And, you can, there's so many different options out there of all these different amazing things that you can do to help yourself in your business. But at the end of the day, you have to know what's right for you, because the truth is everyone comes, they all think that what they're selling, what they're doing is right. And it probably is right for many people, but it may not be right for you. So what that intuition, what that self-trust, and that's what I really want to drive home, that this is about an exercise of self-trust, is giving you the radar, the compass, I call it my little discernment meter. I always ground my channel into my intuition because it's telling me yes, no, not good, bad, whatever it's telling me. That is what allows me to make the right decisions for myself. That's what allows me and my clients to step into authenticity, but not only to step into authenticity, but to find the authentic opportunities and align with that frequency of opportunity that we talked about earlier. That is going to be, in their best and highest good.
And I love how you've kind of twinned the words intuition and self-trust, because, like you said at the beginning, we're all intuitive. We've all got intuition. It's inbuilt, right? But whether we trust our intuition or can even hear its quiet whisper is going to be different from person to person. And,
Absolutely.
us driven overthinker, perfectionist types will get into a pattern of overriding any feelings of intuition, where we later say in retrospect, I should have trusted my gut on that one. I mean, like, well, that was your intuition speaking to you. You were having a sacral response that went, something's off here. But your head said, oh, yeah, but it's a good opportunity. I shouldn't walk away from this. You went ahead and you regretted it later, or whatever the scenario was. And actually trusting that your intuition's already told you, I'm like, I don't know, maybe it might have been you that told me this a while ago. It's like, you spend the whole time looking for more and more birds or more and more ones or whatever it is. And it's like, you've already been given the signs. I just want one more sign, one more sign.
Just one more 777, one more feather. Yeah.
Or just, just can't spirit tell me louder? And it's like, well, your intuition's already told you, the reason you're just looking for another 777 or bird or whatever it is because you haven't got the self-trust to do what your intuition is, what you're already hearing your intuition telling you. So it's like a twin piece. It's like hearing the intuition and then having the self-trust to do what your intuition is nudging you toward. And I love how you link those two pieces. It really resonates for me.
I'm so glad. And absolutely. The thing is that the more that you connect into heal your relationship with self-trust, because the truth is that we haven't been taught self-trust. It's not, that you probably don't trust yourself is not your fault. It's nothing to do with that. It's just the world we live in and the way that we're brought up, etc. Sorry, mind blank. It'll come. But it's when it comes to that self-trust and that kind of inward connection and that stepping forward, that is the key piece. That is where we need to find that balance, because most of the time, you will start to heal that self-trust. You will start to heal your intuition, and you'll realize that your mind actually, isn't against you. And most of the time it's actually agreeing with your intuition. And that's what I think one of my biggest things is, your ego is not against you. Your mind is not evil. It's not getting in the way. It's just A, maybe trying to protect you, B, trying to protect you from failure, etc. And, or B, it's not so much a protection, but it's almost like, it's trying to make us, whether, especially because we're talking to businesswomen, it's trying to make you a success, right? It's trying to make you hopeful. It's trying to inspire you. It's trying to make you believe. And so it's all about creating that beautiful relationship, finding the self-trust in your intuition so that you don't view your mind and, your thoughts. Because I'm like you, I'm a psychic. I worked as a psychic for many years. I'm an embodiment coach. I use my intuition in every breath of my day, basically. But it doesn't stop me from being an overthinker, an anxious overthinker. It just means that it's part of, where I'm coming from. It's a part of what I'm growing through and what I'm evolving through. And one of the most powerful things that I think is really important to recognize in my work, and the reason why I specifically talk about embodied intuition, is because I want to create intuition in my clients. I want to help, well, I don't create it, but I want to help my clients create their connection and their self-trust, their intuition that allows them to move with the resilience through the crests and the waves that is life. There are going to be times in your life where you feel like, uncertain, doubtful. It's not about just rejecting those emotions and getting rid of them completely. It's about allowing you always come back to center and come back to presence, even through those crests, and refine that voice with power. I haven't always had, no one can look at their life and be like, it's always been smooth sailing and straightforward. That's not life. So for me, it's about being able to create that inward connection that you're always able to come back to, that's always with you. And that, as we said, that link of self-trust that means you can come back to it, and recenter to it, through the waves.
And I love how you talk about, that authenticity and the fact that that's the waves and the rides that we're all on. And, a lot of your story, of course, I remember because when we first met, you were still working in the single sessions, doing tarot, having a very large audience of people that really love what you did, but you felt that you'd outgrown just delivering in that way. And instantly, of course, when we met, I could see exactly that in you as well. It was like, what you do, what you deliver is something that, as businesswomen, spiritual businesswomen, is an essential component to really having the businesses that we desire. And, it reminds me of one of the sessions we had, and, going in saying, well, what do these women really want? At the time we were talking about soul avatars and their needs, wants, and the sorts of promises we'd put into your program. And I remember, we get stuck in this idea they want strategy. They want strategy. Well, how can I serve businesswomen? Because I'm not going to deliver the strategy. I don't want to deliver the strategy. If it comes through, I'm happy to share, but that's not who I am. And, as we sat in that and we realized that actually most businesswomen have access to a lot of strategy. There's, they may already know a lot of strategies. And it's like, well, what's
Oh, they
actually
normally know it all.
what's holding people back, and yeah, there's always a new strategy to learn, and it's valuable, like you said, about being in head and heart, mind and body. Yeah, we got to have a balance. But the thing that so many were missing, and the thing that you teach so well, is this piece of whatever strategy you want, do you have the self-trust to even do that? And the gateway, as you describing that intuition and knowing that we go through seasons and crests and waves, it's like that is so powerful, to be able to have self-trust and make decisions in alignment for yourself and not be swayed. It's like when clients come to you, now you're working with this level of client, and they've got, what are the typical things that they are struggling with, that their problems are? I'm wondering if it's something we all recognize.
No, absolutely. I think that most people, do you know what? I actually think the first thing that I'm seeing in a lot of my clients is not just intuitive burnout, but a bit of burnout in general. And the thing is as someone who has experienced a lot of burnout, I can recognize it and I can see when it's actually the burnout that's the issue and not like the self-trust necessarily. So sometimes it's about revitalizing and refinding, with ease and flow. And I think that it's really easy for us as business women to get caught up in, not looking after ourselves. That's such and it's so there, right? We look after our clients, we look after, our families, we look after our friends, but sometimes we forget to look after ourselves. And so sometimes that's actually the first issue, because the thing is you can actually have like intuitive burnout where you're just kind of pushing and pushing. It's like you said with that sign, looking for signs, looking for just one more number, just one more feather, just really pushing, 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 instead of going, okay, enough. I got to go here and I got to be present, and I've actually just got to take the chance. I've got to believe in myself. I've got to trust myself. So that's probably number one. Another really kind of significant thing that I see with clients is the obvious one. It's, it's doubt. It's a similar thing to self-trust. But I think, how do I say this properly? I think that the thing is with doubt is it's that kind of overthinking, over worrying. And I always think it's really important to come back to kind of ease and flow, right? And that sounds so simplistic, but the way that I teach clients to do that is that sometimes we actually just need to come back into the present and be able to hear ourselves. And I know that sounds like a really simple thing, but so many people expect themselves to not doubt their intuition, to not doubt themselves when we can't even necessarily listen to ourselves. And this is all kind of one big knot of same sort of thing, but from a different angle, right? For instance, sometimes, so I meditate every day, twice a day usually. It's not even something that I necessarily do because I think it's the only way to be intuitive. It's just for me a way of creating and centering myself back into peace. I recently just got to 106 days. I'm very proud of meditating on Insight Timer. And one of the most important things when I'm meditating sometimes is suddenly I'll start thinking about something and I'll be like, well, why is that coming in? And that's what so many people, when I'm meditating, I can't stop my mind from wandering. But sometimes you need to think about those things. For instance, last week, I started thinking about something that had happened in my life that felt unjust, with a member of my family. And I just heard this, and suddenly I thought, I got annoyed at first. And I was like, why is this coming through? Why is this like little niggling doubt coming into my peace? And it's the same thing, whether you want to call it intuition or peace or joy or growth or evolution. And then I was like, because this is my inner child and she needs to be heard. And how am I going to expect to hear my intuition, to hear all of this wisdom? Because the thing is sometimes we go in and want to hear those because we're like, well, this is going to get me through life. But I'm going back even a step further. This is about looking after yourself so that you can navigate and get into that embodiment state with your intuition so you can go through those crests and waves. How can you look after yourself? Is there something? And when I was in that state, I was like, this is my inner child. She's feeling unheard. She's feeling like, you know, someone hasn't heard her and she wants to cry. And I actually need to hear her right now, because if I don't hear her, why am I expecting to hear any other voices? You know what I mean? Why am I expecting to hear my intuition? And so I sat with her and I sat in that and I allowed myself to embody the sadness that she was feeling, or the feeling of unjust, the anger as well, like, oh, I'm being not heard. And then once I actually heard her and I allowed myself to do that, and then I could come back to peace. And it's the same thing with doubts, with intuition, with feeling burnt out. Sometimes you actually need to allow yourself to feel it. It feels like the simplest thing, but sometimes we just get so stuck in our, busy lives. My biggest thing is I always feel like I'm rushing, even when I have nowhere to be. We have to stop, pull ourselves back, nervous system regulation, vagus nerve. And once we kind of come into that state and we can be a safe space for ourselves to really just hear what we need to say to ourselves, what we need to feel, then we can start to tap into the intuition. And that is one of the biggest things, because all the self-trust is beautiful, but first we need to really build that safe space for that to occur. And that's like taking that step back. Does that make sense?
And you've got me thinking as well about embodied intuition versus intuition. And it's like, tell us a bit about what it means to be embodied. Because I think, you started referencing our bodies in how you're just describing that. And, a lot of what we're taught around the idea of, intuition and meditation feels very head centered, right? It's like you just need to get out of your head. You need to clear your mind. You need to listen for, what your intuition's telling you. But not everybody really gets into this idea of it being connected to the body. So I'd love to know a bit more about that.
No, absolutely. I believe I believe that so much of our intuition and so much of our innate wisdom lives within our body, and our body has so much to tell us, right? Not We kind of sometimes get in this stuck in this space of our body, like holds a lot of our scars, like whether it, feels like my shoulders are tense, I'm carrying so much of my stress around. But what your body also had is this massive amount of wisdom and magic to kind of relay to you. And the reason why I focus on embodiment. And the reason why I focus on coming down is because I think that intuition has sometimes been and a very outward practice, and often to our detriment, because when you're kind of, and I know this because I'm, a channeler, and I've channeled many, many times and many, many different things. And I've worked and worked and worked on my channel. That's, what so much of my work came down to. But then at the end of the day, I realized that I had to reach inward. And the funny thing about a channel is it kind of is an inward and outward practice, right? But when we go inward and we sit within the body, that's kind of where we have to receive things, right? And that goes back to being present, being grounded, and being open, which are my big three, right? Present, grounded, and open. We have to go in and we have to receive things here because we actually are here. We're not, and let me explain what I mean by intuition being an outward practice, because I think we have this very weird idea that you sit there and, it's just going to come to you. It's just going to be dropped into your head. And sometimes it does work like that. It's awesome, downloads, my guides constantly drop things into my mind, etc. But that's like reaching outward. That's not reaching inward. That's not necessarily reaching in your intuition. Your intuition doesn't live outside of you. It doesn't live above you. It doesn't live behind you. It lives right within you. It's in your heart. It's going deep into your soul and listening to that soul's voice. And so the reason that I call it embodied intuition is because we need to get very deeply grounded into ourselves, creating that safe space, creating that beautiful space for ourselves to actually connect into our heart and into that voice. And the thing is sometimes it does come in body tugs, Sometimes you just know something. You're like, I just know. I just know. I feel it in my gut. I feel it in myself. I feel it in my body. Sometimes it doesn't work like that. Sometimes we go into our body and our heart starts to become our intuitive voice that we need to navigate and understand and work with. But I just think it's really powerful to remember that this is not something that you're pulling down. And I say that especially talking to a lot of like spiritual channelers. Does it mean that you can't get beautiful information from outside of you? No, of course it does. Of course not. There's so much beautiful information, For instance, Joe, I've learned so much beautiful stuff from you, and you're outside of me. And the reason why I've been able to learn that and receive that is because it felt right within me. It felt right for me to be open, in the same way that I, learn information from my channel. But at the end of the day, we come down into that discernment radar. We need to be in ourselves in order to receive so much more, just to receive. That's it. It's about receiving, receiving that body.
And I love that when you say about those intuitive hits that we've all had. I mean, I remember when I was expecting my eldest daughter and I went for that, gender scan. And she said to me, "Oh, do you want to know what sex the baby is?" And I said, "It's a girl."
Yeah.
And she's like, "Oh, do you know that?" I said, "Well, I haven't had the scan yet, but I know it's a girl." And she was like, "Well, let's take a look." She's like, "Oh, yes, it's a girl." And it was like I had no doubt in my mind. It was just like it's like it's a knowing. But I do think that, in life, those sorts of things are quite rare for many of us. And it fascinates me about you and others who are channels. It's just like, I think there's a little envy there. It's like, oh, wouldn't it be cool? Wouldn't it be helpful? Wouldn't it be reassuring if I had that? I had a guide that I was in direct commune with. And I mean, obviously it sounds like something you've lived with most or all of your life, or certainly, as an adult. It's like, what is it like to be a channel? And does it seem weird to you that others don't have this ability to communicate in that way?
That's so funny. We're exactly the same as you. Don't worry. Um, no, I think so. Growing up, I obviously saw things. I remember very vividly seeing spirits of people who had passed on. I never knew anything of it because I thought everyone else saw it, right? So when I started to grow up and realize that, not that this is singular, I don't think like I'm some special thing, not at all, but that it wasn't necessarily something that everyone saw. It was bizarre because it is kind of like my left and right hands, it's something that's very easily accessible to me, but it doesn't mean I worked at it. may have started with a baseline, but I still worked with it. It still was about me creating self-trust, creating and actually being like creating the space to receive all of this information, right? Because the truth is, and this is the truth, I want to know. I have access to these guides and I talk to them and they talk to me, and I don't want to know. I don't want to know everything. I want to be surprised. I want to grow through it. I want to learn through it. I don't want to know the future. Sometimes they give me hints and sometimes I ask questions and I get answers and I'm usually right. I actually never liked to ask around. I had a lot of imposter syndrome around connecting with answers to the future, for the future, sorry. And it's so funny because it turned out to be my strongest suit when it came to being a psychic. And a lot of my business clients, I get things and I give them things and they always feel them as well. But it's a very kind of it's a weird sensation because I feel simultaneously, they talk about the great alone when it comes to spirituality sometimes. I feel simultaneously always surrounded, yet also kind of alone, but not lonely, not in like some horrible, terrible way. I just I just know that they're there and I know that they surround me and I know when they come through and what they say and they're like friends. They feel familiar, right? Um, one of yeah, there's it's a weird thing to explain, and it's not necessarily a singular experience, but I think that it definitely is different for everyone. For example, I knew my sister was going to be born because she came to me before she was born. She We have quite a big gap between us. So I was 12 when she was born. And I knew she was going to be a girl. And it wasn't because I got that intuitive tug that you did with your beautiful daughter. It was because, she essentially came to me. And the thing is, and, so many things have happened like that in my life, so many different ways. Spirit's given me information and hugged me forward and showed me different things. I'm trying to think of examples, and all of a sudden I'm drawing just a complete blank, even though it happens all the
Because I
time.
put you on the spot, right?
No, that's fine. I'll go to bed and I'll wake up and I'll think, "Oh, I should have said that." But it is. I think one of the things is as well is that it just makes me more angry with myself when I don't listen to my gut and don't listen to my guys. Do you know how many times a day, like today, I did something